Good evening and welcome to our forum. I'm Debbie Kay, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Portland. The League is a nonpartisan organization that works to help citizens make informed choices in elections. We do not endorse any candidate or political party, but rather we give voters the information they need to select a candidate. Membership information is available on our website and at the table at the back of the room. We thank the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the Rose E. Tucker Charitable Trust, the Multnomah Bar Foundation, and Metro East Community Media and Paloma Clothing for their generous contributions to our education fund to make these forums possible. Today's forum is being recorded by Metro East Community Media. The forum will be available for on-demand viewing from a link on our website, lwvpdx.org, and from the website of Metro East Community Media, metroeast.org. To view the forums on local access cable television, see the playback schedule posted on our website and in your program. If you have not yet registered to vote, the last day to do so is tomorrow, April 26th. A League volunteer, I hope, will be here this evening to help you register. And if not, we have voter registration forms and can give you other instructions. You can you can contact your county elections office or register online. The online link is at our website, lwvpdx.org. Ballots will be mailed beginning April 27th, and I will now turn the forum over to our moderator. Thank you.
Welcome to the voter forum for ballot measure 26173, the gas tax measure. I am your moderator, Barbara Dudley, with the League of Women Voters of Portland. Through this forum, we seek to offer voters a balanced view of both sides of Oregon Measure 26173, the temporary motor vehicle fuel tax for street repair and traffic safety, otherwise known as the gas tax. We will give equal opportunities to representatives from each side to present the reasons for voting for or against it. The League of Women Voters has no advocacy position on this measure. To discuss the measure, we're joined today by Paul Romaine, Executive Director of the Oregon Fuels Association, and Portland's Mayor Charlie Hales. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our forum will consist of opening statements, followed by questions, and then closing statements. I will rotate the respondents so that the same speaker is not always the first to answer. Questions directed to one side will be given 2-minute responses plus a 1-minute rebuttal from the opposing side. For questions that apply equally to both sides, respondents will have 2 minutes to present their answers. Members of the audience are invited to pose some of these questions. Please write legibly on cards that are available for this purpose, being distributed right up there. Timekeepers sitting in the front row here will signal a 15-second warning and then a stop when the speaker's time has expired. So let's begin. Before my questions, and beginning with Mayor Hales, each speaker will have 5 minutes for an opening statement to explain their position. Mayor Hales.
Thank you very much, and I'm not sure that I will require the full 5 minutes because this is a fairly simple proposition in which we can pay now or pay more later for the streets that we own. That's what's before us. No one likes taxes, and no one likes paying more taxes, but that's what we need to do because it's the right and responsible thing. These are our streets, we own them, and they're not in the condition that they need to be. Whose fault is that? Well, all of us. Our Congress has been paralyzed in partisan gridlock for a long time, and they haven't raised the gas tax because it's cents per gallon, not a rate that goes up over time with inflation. They haven't raised that gas tax since 1993. Since Beanie Babies were the popular children's toys, since there was a newly elected city commissioner in charge of transportation named Hales who had dark brown hair and a 4-year-old at home who's getting married this summer. The Congress has simply been paralyzed on this issue. The legislature has been timid on the issue. They have every now and then worked up their courage to pass a vehicle registration fee increase or a gas tax increase, but they've been minor. And in fact, they've done nothing at all on the subject for the last couple of legislative sessions, even though they encouraged us to do nothing in Portland last year so that they could get a gas tax passed. They didn't, because once again, partisan gridlock and special interest lobbying, which we'll hear more about tonight, is always there present telling legislators, you know, let's not do anything this year. Well, now the bill is due and the years have gone by. So our streets are in poor condition. We own them and we need to take care of them. And they're not safe. We lost 35 Portlanders to traffic deaths last year. Some of that can be avoided with more lighted crosswalks and more safety improvements and more sidewalks in neighborhoods that need those things, particularly East Portland. All of that costs money. So again, it falls to us locally, whether we're talking about mental health or homelessness or transportation. It falls to us locally to do what maybe we would expect Congress or the legislature to do for us, but they're not going to do it for us. There are streets and we own them. So this measure is a modest proposal. It's a 10-cent temporary gas tax for 4 years. It'll raise over $60 million that will go into both safety improvements and maintenance of our streets. Again, two things that we need to spend more money on. Frankly, watching the price at the pump, I can't think of a better time to come up with another 10 cents per gallon when the price at the pump has fallen by well over $1 and has stayed at that much lower level for some time now. So we can bear the cost of taking care of these streets better than perhaps back when gas was $4 a gallon. I'm very pleased that we're doing this. It's not a perfect solution, and perhaps tonight we'll debate some of the fine points of how exactly we can achieve perfect equity in the funding of streets. I hope someday we figure that out. In the meantime, we need to take care of the streets that we own, and if we don't do something now, we will pay more later because the condition of our streets continues to deteriorate. Now, one final point. Your city council, myself included, have not been idle on this subject. With the money we already have, during the time that Steve Novick has been transportation commissioner and I've been your mayor, we've tripled the lane miles of streets that we repave with the dollars that you already provide to us through the gas tax that we already pay. So we have not been idle or dilatory in doing what we can with the dollars that we have. But the bottom line is we simply don't have enough of them. This is a responsible and bearable way to pay for some improvement in something that we all own, and we can avoid paying a lot more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hales. Mr. Romaine.
Thank you. You know, how many out there know the word chutzpah? Ever heard the word chutzpah? One of the definitions I learned in law school, or an example of it, is somebody who goes and kills his mother and father and then asks for mercy of the court because he's an orphan. And that's basically what you have here. It was very interesting when the mayor was listing off the people to blame. First, he started with Congress. And I agree, gas tax hasn't been raised. It should be. Then he started with the state, and some of us have actually been advocating for an increase in the gas tax, but he never mentioned the city. And he was in city council for a long period of that time. Since the 80s, we have neglected our streets. That's why they're in bad shape. The Oregonian a year ago, a little more than a year ago, did an article on how there has been $200 million that was earmarked for road repair that went away. It was moved to other things. Now, when you're in city council, priorities change. You have to make tough decisions all the time. And some of those are legit decisions. But the bottom line is they had an opportunity to fix the streets. They chose not to put the money into something else. And now we have a crisis. The one thing I will absolutely agree with Charlie on is that we have a crisis in the roads right now. What we object to, first of all, let me tell you what, right now you pay about a quarter to maybe even a little more than a quarter of a gallon of gas. The price of it is taxes. You have a 18-cent federal tax, a 30-cent state tax, and a 3-cent Multnomah County tax if you buy your fuel in Multnomah County. If the city tax goes into effect, you'll be paying 61 cents per gallon in taxes. That's how much that you'll end up paying. We are in the Fuels Association, our problem is more of a local versus statewide issue, because it's a very easy thing to avoid paying that local tax. You buy your fuel someplace else, or you drive something that doesn't require fuel, or you do something else, you're still using the road, but you actually can avoid paying that tax. If it's a statewide tax, your options are much more limited, because then you're going to pay pretty much wherever you are. What has to happen, frankly, at the state level is the state needs to look at a statewide gas tax and possibly reallocate how much goes to cities and counties, because there is a local need there. And that's something that can be done through negotiations. This ballot measure, all it does is impose a tax. There's no breaks in this ballot measure, there's nothing. That's in a separate resolution or ordinance that was passed that can be changed. This gas tax that you're voting on simply says 10 cents by Constitution, it has to go to the roads. But that's a pretty broad definition. You can do a lot of things. What we would suggest is perhaps what you need to do is fix the problem first, which is fill the potholes, fix the streets, make them work, and then we'll talk about the other things that can be done. But fix the potholes first. And that's the problem that we have right now with the current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you both. We're going to open the questions section of the discussion by allowing each of you to ask a question of the other. And you will have 2 minutes to answer that question. So you can dig a little deeper if there was something you think was skated over. So, Mr. Romaine, what question would you like to ask the Fix Our Streets campaign or Mayor Hales?
I should preface this by saying I've known Charlie for a long time, and I consider him a friend. And I think what he's doing is something he does truly believe in. And my problem is when you first called me to ask me to help with this, looking at how the city's spending its money and perhaps maybe coming up with a way to fix the streets, I said what we should do is look at this from a holistic standpoint. Look at how all the bureaus are spending their money, not just PBOT. Look at all that. I recall you saying, that's great. I went to the meeting, and the first thing that your representative said there, it's the only budget we're going to be able to look at is PBOT's budget. And I walked out at that point. What you need to do, why won't you look at the entire city budget and maybe reprioritize a few things to give people more confidence in the ability of the city to actually solve immediate problems?
Well, Paul, I'm going to propose my budget next week, and you and everyone else will have a chance to look at it. So if you want to look at our budget and find more money for streets, you'll be welcome to do that. But you will find, of course, again, that with the budget that we already get, which trickles down through a formula of the state and federal gas taxes, because the money we get for street maintenance comes from those sources, that we have tripled the amount of repaving and pothole filling that we're doing with that current stream of money. I'm very proud of that. And we have advanced safety projects all over the city, in some case with some additional help from the legislature, which we appreciate very much. Representative Fagan in East Portland and some other legislators got us some one-time funding. Then, thanks to Amanda Fritz, our city council changed our budgetary policy for when we get one-time money, when the economy approves and we get one-time money, and she got us to pass a very responsible policy that at least half of that money goes into infrastructure, and that's why we put $29 million of property tax dollars into the street system last year when we had the chance. So you take a look at our budget and tell us how we can do more.
Thank you. And now you have an...
Yeah, my question to you, Paul, everybody loves to insinuate that there's all this money, and if only the city spent it differently, we could solve this problem. So I want you to solve it for us right here tonight. 90% of the city's general fund budget goes to police, fire, and parks. That's where the money goes. Which one of those would you recommend that we cut? Because it's not a false choice. That's where the money goes. So it's police, fire, or parks? Which one of those would you cut in order for us to transfer money to the street fund so that we didn't have to tax gasoline and inconvenience the corporations that you work for?
Well, first of all, Charlie, I don't work for corporations. Most of these things are run by individuals. They're gas stations. They're not big oil companies. Nobody has holes in the ground where they're pulling oil out. There's no money in retail gasoline. You should know that. Second of all, start with the Regional Arts Commission. You get $3 million to the Regional Arts Commission. Now, maybe that's a good thing, but we already have an arts tax, so why do you need other money going there? There are other things in the budget. I'm not a budget expert, never held myself out to be a budget expert. And frankly, I'm not looking for you to put in everything in the current city budget into streets, because I know there's a lot of priorities out there. There's the homeless issue. There's the problem we have with Springwater Corridor, where we're trying to figure out how to basically make it safe, all those things. I understand where you're coming from. What I'm saying is there has to be more than just a, let's take this new tax and put it in, because based on the city's history, what I'm afraid is going to happen is you're going to end up saying 2 years from now, whoops, we got another priority. Let's take all this other money that we were using out of the general fund or some other place, and we'll just rely on the road tax. The road tax can only be used for roads, but all the other money is available, or a lot of the other money is available for roads too. Maybe some of it as a token ought to be thrown in there.
All right, now it's my turn to ask a question from the League. The Auditor's Office in a 2013 report said that although transportation revenue had increased in recent years, funding for maintenance had decreased, while PBOT funds, Bureau of Transportation funds, went to other priorities like streetcar, downtown marketing, transit mall, upkeep, and debt payments. How then, if that's the case, first of all, is that true? And second of all, how do you explain to voters that they now have to come up with yet more money at the pump for the street maintenance that wasn't done with the Bureau of Transportation's funds? And I want a second part to that question, which is, if the state does take action in the upcoming session, will that in any way relieve this tax, or is it in place regardless?
Maybe you want me to start?
Yes.
Let me take your second question first, because it's simpler. Well, they're both simple. The second question is, if the legislature passes a gas tax, will it obviate the need for a local one? Yes, if that gas tax is 50 cents a gallon. If you think the Oregon legislature will pass a gas tax of 50 cents a gallon, because it was never indexed, because it was always cents per gallon and not indexed for inflation, it's steadily lost buying power over the decades. So it's that bad, we're that far behind that the legislature would have to increase the tax by that much. So obviously, that's not likely. This is a temporary tax. This is proposed for 4 years only, and then the voters will get a chance to see how we did. Do they want to renew it? Do they want to let it lapse? Or has the legislature ridden to our rescue? To your first question, the auditor's report that said the city had not done a particularly good job of spending transportation money. Actually, one of the reasons I ran for this office was that the city's financial management was not at its best before I took office. We were being sued. Actually, I think you know a little bit about that, Paul. We were being sued by people who claimed, rightly in some instances, that the city was spending water and sewer funds on things that weren't appropriate. The transportation system was in poor shape, and there were some questionable expenditures. Frankly, one of the things I'm very proud about my service as mayor is we've cleaned all that up. And every dime of water and sewer revenues are going to water and sewer services, and those only. And again, we have taken the transportation dollars that we have and focused them on basic maintenance and safety. We spent $29 million of one-time revenue that we were able to get because of an economic improvement on our streets. And we've tripled the paving effort with the money that we already have. So I would submit that we've been very responsible stewards. My awesome power does not extend to the past, but I have tried to clean it up as best I could.
Mr. Romaine, you have a minute for rebuttal before I ask a question to you directly.
Well, I'll just explain the process. Basically, the state could override, in effect, the gas tax. And when you're in negotiations at the state level with gas tax, there's a lot of different creative things that come into play. For example, you can say, all right, we'll do this, we'll put this in, the state gas tax will go up this amount, but it'll be decreased by all these other things. There are other issues out there that affect the price of fuel at the pump, and all those things are part of the negotiations. It could go into something that would be a package that might benefit the locals. Again, that's something the legislature wants to take up in 2017. 2016 was a horrible year to do it. Basically, you had a Democratic legislature that decided to cram down one particular measure, dealt with low carbon fuel standard, down everybody's throat. And once that went through, it killed any talk about any other thing that might affect the price of fuel.
Thank you. And now, a question to you, and you'll have a minute for rebuttal. So this is 2 minutes to you, Mr. Romaine. I understand you agree that Portland's roads need maintenance badly. The question really is, doesn't it make sense to take preventive action now rather than put it off? And I know you were arguing that the state would be a better source of funding to do this, but if the state hasn't acted and may not act, what should we do?
I have much more confidence that the state actually will act this time around, especially if the city of Portland actually put in something. I can pretty much guarantee you that if this measure passes, the state will do absolutely nothing. There will be no gas tax at the statewide level. Referral of a gas tax at the statewide level is very simple, and it's outside of the city of Portland, your population for voting is a little more conservative than they are within the city. So while measures that could pass in the city probably don't stand much of a chance outside the city, and it makes it a very difficult proposition. We would like to see a statewide package because it's not just the city of Portland's roads that are having a problem. It's everything, and it's also the interstate highways. It's all the different things that we really need to work on. And the problem is, if this particular tax passes, you're never going to see that. Now, what I have always suggested, is let the city, again, go into the budget process, make a couple of hard cuts. There are folks lined up, interest groups that are supporting every dime that's spent by the city. And I know what Amanda and Charlie have to face. I see it. When I go there, I've said to Charlie many times, I have absolutely no idea why I ran for this thing. But it's crazy, the pressure that goes on you. But you have to make some hard decisions about where things go. And there are going to have to be some token cuts, because back in the 80s and 90s, decisions were made that you are having to live with now.
Paul, you know that's a bogus argument. I have to put it that bluntly. The city of Portland has 200 less employees than it had 8 years ago. 100 less police officers and 50 less people in the Water Bureau, and then the rest are scattered into other bureaus. Let me say that again. A city that has grown in population, that has as many challenges as we have today, has 200 less employees than it had 8 years ago. We got a AAA rating from Moody's. We had an outside audit of our city's finances. It's this thick, by Moss Adams, and they sat in front of Commissioner Fritz and me and the rest of the city council, and they had the shortest report ever. They said, we have no issues with the financial management of this city. So it is a bogus argument to say you can go dig through our budget and find the tens of millions of dollars that we need to spend right now to keep our streets from getting any worse. I'm mystified as to why people who sell gasoline don't want the roads to be good enough for us to get to their stations.
Okay, thank you both. And now we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Because these seem to be directed at one or the other of you, you will have 2 minutes to respond. And again, if there's a need for a rebuttal, you can do that. The first one is, I think, about the equity of this tax. The revenue in Multnomah County from the gas tax has been declining because cars are becoming more fuel efficient. Clearly, a gas tax falls more heavily on older vehicles, which translates into a heavier burden on low-income drivers. And regardless, a gas tax is regressive in the sense that a lower income person is going to be spending more of a portion of their income on gasoline. So the question is that fair? And if not, what do you intend to do to compensate, and what alternatives could be used to make the tax more equitable? So that's to you, Mayor
Okay.
Hills.
No, the gas tax is not fair. It's cents per gallon, and so it falls unevenly on people based on ability to pay, based on income, because obviously they're paying at the pump. And therefore, it's imperfect, like all tax mechanisms. However, there are a couple of mitigating factors. One is, as I mentioned earlier, the price of gasoline has fallen precipitously in the last few years. That's a blessing to us all that have to buy gasoline. And so it's going to have less of an impact than it would have had when the price was higher. Secondly, when you look at taxes overall, if you take them all together, there's a little more rough justice in it, in that higher income people tend to live in more expensive houses and they pay more property tax. So that system is less inequitable. We also have a business profits tax in Portland and Multnomah County, a business income tax, and obviously that's based on the profitability of business. And then the other big local revenue source that we have is hotel, motel room taxes, which primarily tax tourists and business travelers. So you put all that together, and our local tax system is, while not necessarily a model of progressivity, at least not wholly inequitable as a flat tax kind of system would be. So when you blend the gas tax in with all the rest of that, it's a, not beautiful, but at least not completely inequitable system. Again, I know of no perfectly just way to pay for public schools. My children have left home and I still pay high school taxes, but I'm willing to do that. I know of no perfectly just way to pay for roads, gas taxes and vehicle registration fees, and some of our local property taxes are what we have. But I think this is a bearable and responsible, relatively small tax for all of us who buy gasoline to pay to take care of the roads that we all own.
If I may.
Yes.
What you're voting on is basically a 5% sales tax at the local level, because that tax will be passed on. It's not imposed at the sale point, but it goes into the price that the service station pays for the fuel. And if that service station has to pay 10 cents more per gallon, they're going to pass it on. Retail gas is a very small margin commodity. It used to not be that way. And the reason you know it's small margin now is the major oil companies have divested themselves from the retail sphere. If this was a big margin place, the major oil companies would own stations. They don't. That flag station is a local person who has to pass that tax on, and 10 cents on a $2 gallon is a 5-cent sales tax.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Romaine, from the audience, and then Mayor Hales, you'll get a minute to respond. I understand that you represent the service station owners, and your concern about the Portland gas tax is that it would, fall unfairly on drivers and service stations within the city limits, and therefore you argue that a state tax is more fair. I presume you would argue that a federal tax is even more fair, or a global tax even more fair than that.
Oh, is that
Just
a
thought
question
I'd
or
throw
is that
that
a statement?
But the question is, if a state tax does not pass, I know you think it might, well, if it does not, what do you do about the fact that our roads need maintenance, if you're in Charlie Hales's position?
That's a very interesting question, because we are really hoping that there is going to be a statewide gas tax. In 2009, we actually helped get through it was a 4-cent gas tax. We actually thought, I had suggested a higher gas tax than that, but for other reasons, folks didn't want to vote for it. And we kept it off the ballot. We basically kept some of the truckers and some of our folks from referring it to the ballot. And the reason was very simple. We needed it. We needed it badly. We need it now, and we need it statewide. So we're more than willing to work with people to try and keep that off the ballot. The fairest, a national tax really is it's inefficient. I mean, basically, you're paying the money, it's going back to Washington DC, then comes back out here. There's too many people that touch the stuff. It's just not worth it. Statewide gas tax is considerably better for everybody to attempt to pay. I hope I answered at least a portion of that question. She's not looking at me. I don't have any idea.
Sorry, I was distracted. You did.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But the problem is if it doesn't pass.
Like I said, if it doesn't pass, that's something we're going to have to deal with. It is. We are going to try and get it passed. That's what we have to hope we do, that we get something passed at the statewide level that actually starts trying to solve some of the problems. The other thing that the city needs to do, and what Charlie had mentioned earlier on, is look at the budget, look at all these programs. They're great programs. Yes, they are. All of them. They're probably all great programs. So maybe there's one or two or three that I don't like, but they're probably all great programs. But at some point you have to say, this great program is not as great as this other greater program, therefore I have to cut this and fund this. And that's a tough political decision for anybody to make.
Mayor Hales.
Paul, please stop referring to generic government programs. It's police, fire, and parks. That's what the city spends its general fund money on. Everything else is rounding error, okay? So if you really want to advance the argument, and it's bogus, and that's why you won't answer that question. If you really want to advance the argument that somehow the city could just pay for this with the money it has, you have to cut police, fire, or parks. Why am I saying this? I'm not running for office. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Now, another bogus argument is let's send money off to Salem and hope that we get enough back to manage our local problems. I don't have much confidence in that at all. I like our legislature, I like our governor, but I haven't seen oodles of political courage in Salem on this issue. You just validated that when you said after heroic effort a few years ago, the legislature increased the tax by 4 cents, thus only partially catching up to what they should have done year by year by year. The only way to solve this problem is for us to be adults here and solve it ourselves.
If I might.
I'll give you each another 30 seconds.
Okay. The utility fee was passed in the 80s. That was supposed to be at least 20-some%, about 28% was supposed to be used for roads. That went away. Now,
No, it didn't. It goes to police, fire, and parks.
right, but the decision was made to take that from the roads and put it in something.
police, fire,
Right,
and parks.
That's a political decision. The Regional Arts Commission, again, that's general fund money. You made a decision, a political decision to put it in there. Those are political decisions. You must view one more important than the other if you make that decision. That's my that's why I object.
You could have another 30 seconds.
No, it's just,
Specific
yeah,
point.
there are small programs in city government, like the Office of Neighborhood Involvement and the Regional Arts and Culture Commission, that add up to a few $1 million. We need tens of millions of dollars more per year going into our streets. This measure will put about 16 million more a year into our streets for 4 years. It's only a down payment on this big problem. The roof is leaking. This will patch it. Arguing that we should go find 1 or 2 shingles when we need 50 is not functional.
All right. Now you each have another 2 minutes for closing statements. So don't just keep responding to the last point. Make your best possible points in your last 2 minutes. And Mr. Romaine, you go first.
Again, I go back to the city basically looking for money for roads, when it should have been looking over the last 30 years. The Oregonian, again, did a very excellent job of going through and detailing about $200 million that was earmarked for roads that was not spent on roads. Some of it was when Charlie was there, but most of it was done when Charlie was not there. And I'm not putting the blame on Charlie or any one person. This was a collective decision by everybody. This measure will raise money, but there's nothing in this measure that stops the city from saying, all right, some of the other things that we are maybe we're taking money from other parts of the general fund surplus and putting that into the streets. Maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Maybe we can put that into other things. If this measure passes, you're not going to see any other sources, I believe, of money into working the streets, getting the streets where they need to be. We need to fix the potholes, not restripe the streets for bikes, not put in additional beautification when you build a new road. That's all well and good, but the first thing you do is fix the existing streets, then do everything else. It's like buy food for the family and then worry about the vacation later.
I'm glad that Paul said that, because that's exactly what we've done. We have taken the dollars that we have and spent them responsibly. We have tripled the repaving budget, and we have prioritized safety in a city where we kill more people with our cars than we do with guns, and that's a tragedy. And we can do something about making our streets safer, and we can do something about reversing that curve of deferred maintenance. You can believe me that we've been fiscally responsible or not, but I'm telling you, that's been a priority for me as your mayor, and I'll stand by every dime of how we've spent the money that we do have, but I'll also tell you and look you straight in the face and tell you it's not enough. It's not a happy message. It's not a feel-good message. It's not a message for somebody who's running for re-election, but I'm not. So I'm here telling you something straight and true, which is these are our streets, we own them, and the only thing that we can do that's responsible is stop the bleeding. And this modest measure, which is temporary and which will be overseen by a citizens committee, so you don't have to believe me, to make sure that every dime of this money goes into making our streets safer for everyone and better maintained for all of us. I think that's the right and responsible thing to do, and that's why I'm going to vote for this gas tax, and I hope Portlanders join me in doing that.
Thank you both. This concludes the forum. We thank you for participating and also thank our volunteers, especially the timers. Please check our website, lwvpdx.org, to view the forums on demand and for replay dates, times, and channels for local access cable TV. You can pick up the League of Women Voters Guide here, also at your local public library. Online, you can check Vote 411 for a guide to candidates and ballot measures. This measure, 26-173, will be on your ballot on May 17th. As in all Oregon elections, you will receive a mail-in ballot. Ballots must be mailed back early or delivered to an official drop-off site anywhere in Oregon no later than 8 p.m. on Tuesday, May 17th. Postmarks do not count. So, this is Barbara Dudley for the League of Women Voters of Portland. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being an informed voter, and remember that your vote counts.
Thank you.